If you're an ABAP developer, you know that things have changed a lot, especially since version 7.40 came along. We've got all these new tools to write code that's cleaner and way more concise. Today, we're going to zero in on one of the biggest game changers, inline declarations. Now, when you get them right, your code is just beautiful. But if you get them wrong, well, you could be staring down some major performance issues and really tricky bugs.
I mean, just look at this. The difference is night and day, right? On the left, you've got the classic way of doing things. Declare the table, then select into it. We've all written it a million times. But on the right, a single, clean line that does the exact same thing. This is what Modern ABAP is all about, simplicity. But, and this is a big but, we're about to see how that simplicity can hide some serious traps if you're not paying attention.
So first up, let's talk about then and now. For what feels like forever, the rule was simple. Declare all your variables at the top of your program or subroutine. But this new approach, it completely flips that idea on its head.
So what is an inline declaration? Well, to put it simply, using something like data or field symbol lets you create your variable at the exact moment you first need it. It gets declared and filled with data all in one shot. And you know what that means? No more scrolling all the way to the top of your code just to figure out what a variable's type is. It's right there.
The whole philosophy behind this is pretty brilliant when you think about it. The ABAP compiler is already smart. It knows what kind of data a statement needs to work with. So why are we doing the work for it? Inline declarations just let the compiler handle it. It figures out the data type on its own and creates the variable for us. We're basically letting the system do the heavy lifting. Okay, so let's get into our next section, modern syntax in action. Enough with the theory, let's see how the stuff actually looks in the kind of ABAP statements we write every single day.
All right, take a classic loop at statement. You know the drill. In the old days, you had to explicitly declare a work area, LSWA, making sure it had the right line type. Now, you just write into data, LSWA. That's it. The compiler looks at the table, figures out the line type, and creates the work area for you. It's so much cleaner, and you're way less likely to make a typo.
And it's the exact same story with read table. Instead of having a separate data statement floating around somewhere for your work area, you declare it right inside the read statement itself. This keeps the variable declaration right next to where you're using it, which makes the code 1,000 times easier to read.
But where this syntax really shines is with database selects. The old way felt so clunky. You needed types declarations, then data statements. With the modern OpenSQL, you just pop @ data opting into the into table clause. The compiler literally builds the internal table for you based on the fields you selected. This is a massive time saver.
But hold on, because we're just scratching the surface here. Inline declarations are just one case of a much bigger puzzle. They're part of a whole family of new tools, constructor operators, that let us build and manipulate data in really powerful ways. For example, check this out. Using the value operator, you can combine it with a for expression to build an entire internal table by looping over another one all in a single statement. You can even throw in a where clause to filter the data. Now think about that for a second. This one line can replace an entire loop at, append, and loop block. It's incredibly powerful.
Okay, so at this point, you're probably thinking this is the greatest thing ever. And it is pretty amazing. But there's always a but, isn't there? This is where we have to talk about why you need to proceed with caution. Because there are a couple of hidden dangers that can turn all this convenience into a real headache.
And that brings us to the first really big question. We've made our code shorter, cleaner, simpler to read, but is it actually faster? Well, in some very common situations, the answer is a big, flashing no. Just look at these numbers. This is from a performance test of a nested loop, where we're reading from an inner table using a key. The inline version on the left, it took over 147 times milliseconds. Now look at the version with an explicitly declared sorted table, 81 milliseconds. We're not talking about a small difference here. This is the difference between an application that works and one that is completely unusable. So here's the absolute #1 thing you have to remember. When you use into table at data, ABAP always creates a standard table, no keys. And if you then try to read from that big table inside a loop using a key, what happens? The system has to do a full table scan every single time. And that is what leads to the catastrophic performance we just saw. Someone on the SAP community forums put it perfectly. They said it's not really a problem with inline declarations, it's a problem with a developer using them without understanding what's happening under the hood. @data gives you a standard table, period. If you need a sorted or a hash table for performance, you still need to go back and declare it the old-fashioned way.
Now for the second danger. This one is a lot more subtle, a little sneakier, but it can be just as bad. It's a concept called variable shadowing.
Take a look at this example. Imagine we have a global variable called vData, but then, inside a loop or a subroutine, we use an inline declaration to create another variable with the exact same name. From that point on, inside that code block, anytime we say vData, we're talking about the new local one. The global one is effectively hidden. It's been shadowed. And this can lead to some of the most confusing bugs you'll ever see, where it feels like your data is just disappearing.
So, with all that said, let's pull back and look at the big picture. Because this isn't just about learning some new syntax, it's really about adopting a whole new strategy for how we develop.
When you use these new features the right way, you're embracing the ideas of clean ABAP, making your code easier for you and everyone else to read and maintain. You're cutting out tons of boilerplate code. You're also aligning with the whole S/4HANA philosophy of writing lean, efficient code. And honestly, you're future-proofing your own skills as a developer. And the impact here is very real. We're talking about a potential reduction of over 50% in the number of lines you have to write just for data declarations and setting things up. That's less code to write, less code to read, and less code to maintain down the road.
So we end up right back where we started. Modern ABAP gives us these incredibly convenient and powerful tools, but that convenience is useless or even dangerous if it's not backed up by knowledge. The key takeaway is this: use inline declarations. Use them for your simple local variables. Use them for quick one-off data selections. But the second performance becomes a factor, especially with large tables inside loops, you have to switch back to explicit declarations. The best developers know which tool to use and when. So the real question for you is, how are you going to strike that balance in your own code?